Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's Family Connection workshop for parents on how to manage and cope with stress for your child. My name is Jen Wen, and I am a family outreach representative with the Office of Family and Community Engagement. I will be the facilitator for tonight's session, where we will learn tools on how to help your child navigate and cope with stress. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone attending tonight that this is a follow-up workshop to the vaping session back in October. The focus of tonight's Family Connection is identifying what stress is and different techniques to guide your child to a more balanced state. So without further ado, let's welcome our panelist, Michelle Tryon. She is a community outreach coordinator and parent educator for CHKD. She is a certified child life specialist and a seasoned mindfulness teacher and practitioner. She is also recognized as a Hope 101 facilitator by the Hope National Resource Center at Tufts University. And she is a nationally recognized trainer consultant with Nurturing Parenting Program. Tonight, we'll listen to a presentation from Ms. Tryon. Ms. Tryon?
Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate being here with all of you. And I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully there'll be no stress with technology. All right, are you seeing the screen there?
Yes, it looks great. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again for having me this evening. I live here in Virginia Beach. I have a grandchild that goes to Virginia Beach schools, and I'm so pleased to always talk with parents about how they can help their children cope. So let's just move forward here. I have some curiosity questions here. I rather than go with goals and objectives, because I don't want any stress, there's no test at the end of this. This is just some things for you to be thinking about as we're talking about helping children cope. So these are the curiosity questions. What is stress? What do we mean by stress? How do we define stress? Is it good or bad? Is there a chance that stress could be helpful? How does a child learn to cope? And how can I help? And when I say I, meaning you as a parent or a provider or a caregiver, or if you're an educator, how can you help children learn to cope? And then what about me? It always is going to go back to really taking good care of ourselves and thinking about the way that we cope with stressful events that are inevitable in our lives. And does practice make perfect? So I'll be giving you some techniques, some strategies, some tips on things that we can do for ourselves and for our children, and how often we practice them will hopefully become automatic for us. So before we even begin, I'd like you to think about this, and you can pause the video at any point as we're going along. We don't have the chat box activated, so just be thinking about these things for yourself. And then if you need to pause and contemplate, that's fine, then you can turn it back on. But the icebreaker really is to think about your own level of well-being this evening. So when I say well-being, it's not what's going on in your life, but how you are handling what's going on in your life. So one would be, I'm emotionally exhausted. I just don't feel like I can go another step. This is really draining on me. I have fatigue, maybe feeling burnout. And then 5 would be, there's a lot going on, but I'm managing it. I'm coping pretty well. I seem to be going with the flow. So somewhere in that level from 1 to 5, and hopefully more of you are towards the 5 end at least, to be thinking about how things are going for you right now. We're going to talk about techniques that we can help our children, but also be thinking about how you can help yourself, in particular if you're feeling really on that lower end of that level of well-being. All right, let's move along here then. So what is stress? So stressors are the internal or external experiences or situations that inhibit or trigger a reaction or response. And stress is actually that reaction or that response. So let's break this down a little bit. So stressors, if they're internal, it could be that I'm hungry or I'm tired or I'm in pain. So internally, something's going on that's got me off my game a little bit. or it could be external experiences. So things that are happening outside of us, many of which we don't have control over. So is there a bill due and I don't feel like I have enough funds for it? Is there some pressure at work, or is my child having some academic pressure? So there's external experiences. So those are all the situations that are going on. And they either inhibit, which means we hold back, or they trigger a reaction or a response. And the trigger is that we actually act it out. We notice it and we act on it. So for example, if a child was in a classroom situation and they thought they knew the answer, but they didn't want to get it wrong, they may inhibit themselves and not raise their hand. Or if there's something, I've gotten this wrong before, I'm feeling really anxious about it. That would be a reaction or response. So that's the stress piece of it. That is the physiological or psychological change is the reaction or the response to the experience or situation. So here's that second curiosity question. Can stress be good? So to a certain degree, yes, it can be good, because stress, we have a stressful experience, it can teach us to cope. We get through it, we get to the other side of it, and we're like, okay, I did it, and I can do it again. It can support growth and development. So for instance, if I have my granddaughter with me, and she's 7 now, but I'm thinking back when she was about 4, she climbed up to the very top of the really tall slide at the playground, and she hadn't gone down that slide before, and she was feeling a little bit stressed out about it, some pressure. She wanted to do it, so it was a good motivator, but she had to take that leap, right? So once she did it, she got to the bottom and she was like, I did it. She was so excited. But if there is something that's stressful and we get through it, it can support that growth and development. And it begins to build character. I know that I can do hard things. It encourages action and motivates. So if we had no pressure, no stress to get something done, either in school or at work, I have to get these grades in, or whatever it is, we could just sit back and become kind of lackadaisical about things, right? And it also is built into our DNA. Stress lets us know that something is wrong. It's like a red flag. There's some kind of a threat here. There's something going on that I need to pay attention to. So it can be good. So when we're thinking about the types of stressors, so remember the stressors are either internal or external, things, situations, experiences that are going on. And for this one, you might want to pause a little bit. But what types of stressors are children exposed to these days? All right, so just take a moment to think about that. I'll give you a couple of examples that usually come up. So what type of stressors? And I mentioned a few. So it can be financial for the family if there's some financial constraints. For children, often it's going to be, how do I fit in with other kids? Now we have social media, so that fear of missing out may be one that we didn't have a few years back. It can be parents that are arguing or divorced. There could be illness in the family. If you celebrate the holidays, there may be some stress about getting that right. So what are children exposed to these days? And then we think about some of the things that are really more prominent, and maybe because we have this 24/7 media, but we're aware of maybe violence in the community. We could be aware of something that's happening even in another state. If there's a weather event, or some kind of a disaster that's going on. Certainly politics. So there's a lot of things that children are exposed to, and depending on their age, how much of that they really understand. So think about that for yourself and for your children and the children that you either work with, or maybe the children in your neighborhood. So there's a difference between stress and distress. And distress happens when there is an imbalance between the demands on the child or the family or the community and the ability to meet those demands. So if we look at this bell curve here, if there's no stress at all, there really can be boredom and depression. There's kind of apathy, and then when we go up the side here, there's increased attention, that interest, there's something that's motivating us, maybe something I have to get done, but there's actually at the peak that optimal performance. So I'm in the flow, things are coming at me, but I'm handling it and I'm feeling really good about it. That's where the building the coping comes in. Now, when we tip over to the other side and the pressure becomes too much, we're no longer in the flow, we feel disconnected, we feel even a threat to ourselves physically. It can be a physical reaction. We have that strong anxiety, can go to complete meltdown. And that's when I don't feel like I can meet the demands that are being put on me. I'm overwhelmed. So the severity and the duration of it will let us know whether there's distress or stress that's manageable. And what we'd like to do is certainly lessen the stressful experiences that our children have, but also to teach them to cope with things that do come their way, because inevitably there are pressures in life. So we want them to stay on that optimal performance. So what can we do to help a child learn to cope? So I've talked about really 3 different types of stress. There's positive stress, which is that idea that I'm learning new skills. So maybe I have a spelling test and I study for it and, I'm motivated and I do well on it. That would be positive stress. And then there's tolerable stress. So let's just use the same idea with the spelling test. Of course, there's many different examples we could put in here. But tolerable stress would be, maybe I have a reading disability, or I really have challenges with spelling. And when I have a spelling test coming up, I get very anxious about it. But it becomes tolerable because I have a supportive adult, either my parent, my teacher, an aide, my grandma, my next door neighbor, whoever it is, my coach. I have a supportive adult in my life who helps me learn to regulate my emotions and my behavior. They make it tolerable. They help me out. And I can go to them when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So children can get through so many things in life if they have a supportive adult in their environment. So, in working in the hospital setting for many years, you would see children coming into a hospital setting, which is stressful in itself, but they're dealing maybe with a chronic illness. If they had an adult with them who could be supportive and helpful, they could get through anything. And really, I mean anything. And then we have toxic stress. So this is where it really becomes distressful. It gets kind of stuck. So I have an overwhelming emotion. I'm a child, but I don't have anybody to help me. Or the person that I'm asking to help me is ignoring me, thinking that I'm overreacting, or shaming me, dismissing my feelings. They might even be yelling or screaming at me, or actually hurting me. And so there's nowhere for me to go with that stress. I don't know how to make it manageable, and I don't have anyone to help me. So certainly what we have within our control, regardless of what experiences are happening outside, what we have is the ability to be there for our children, to help them organize their feelings, help them make some plans about how they can prioritize things. And we're going to talk more about that. What are some strategies? So we're going to support them when they're having positive opportunities to get through something stressful. And when it is something that's challenging for them, we're going to be there to support them, be on their side, be there to help them as they navigate. All right, so stress or distress. A lot of times when we say stress, we're really thinking of distress. If you say, I'm so stressed out, I'm really distressed. It's not that the stress is good at that point, but it's the physical and psychological response. So there is a physical component to it. That's why when people don't mitigate their stress, there can be some health challenges. So it's the body's response to any demand, any pressure or threat, whether it's real or perceived. That's really important there to say whether it's real or perceived. So because we are hardwired, and when we have a stressful response, a stress response, our DNA is kicking in. That's what it's supposed to do. We're supposed to get ready for fight or flight, right? But if it's a perceived threat or not something that we can really take on, it can still feel like a demand or a pressure. And the body will still react to that as if you could freeze, collapse, fight, or flight. So the body makes cortisol and adrenaline, gets ready for that. Um, if it's something that you can't make go away, though, like say you get a bill in the mail and you don't have the funds to pay it, you can tear it up, but they're going to send you another one, right? Or say that your boss gives you an assignment that you just really don't have time for. You know, you can't necessarily say, no, I don't have time for this. So that's a perceived threat. It's not a physical threat. You can't yell at your boss or, just walk away. So you can't do that fight or flight that you're hardwired for. And then the freeze or collapse, if we wanted to go with the faint kind of idea, stick with the F's there, would actually be that we're so overwhelmed that we really don't know which way to turn. And sometimes you'll see that with a child. They're feeling stressed and they look like they're just off in, daydreaming or in their own zone, but they really have gone into that shutdown. They just feeling overwhelmed. So we can see that as maybe a call for help. Then there's this idea of tend and befriend. And this is a newer idea that's looked at in the theories of stress, is that for some people, when they are feeling stressed, they either tend to other people or they befriend. And you see this more with women in particular, that if they're stressed out, they may call up a sister or a girlfriend and they talk about what's going on. And then that person is there to help them. So it's that reaching out. I also was thinking about for a young child, it was a family that was in a very stressful situation, and there was some substance abuse on the part of the parent, and so there was 4 siblings, and the older sibling, who was about 9 or 10, actually used to help the younger siblings get ready for school. So, is that healthy coping? It was actually that child's way of tending to the younger brothers and sisters and feeling like they could manage and have some control in the situation. So that actually would be a positive coping strategy for that child. Now, if circumstances changed for the family, or if that child went into foster care, that coping strategy may not be needed any longer, and so it wouldn't be helpful. But we really think about what's helpful for children at different stages and ages and circumstances, and they usually can figure out some way to help themselves. And what we want to do is really be thinking about that all behavior is communication. So what does my child need? And this is one of my favorite pictures. I use it in almost all the talks that I do. So what we see up on the top here is the tip of the iceberg. And then everything that is underneath this big submerged area of ice is what we don't necessarily see or don't necessarily understand. We're only seeing the behavior. So we only see what's above board, and we have to kind of figure out, what is this behavior telling me? What does my child need? And we can keep it simple. If all behavior is communication, we want to be thinking about when they are showing us that they're stressed, what does that look like? How can I tend and befriend my child so that they can do a behavior that would be more appropriate to relieve their stress? Children will always need a supportive adult. If we ask that, what does my child need? They will need a supportive adult to help them figure out what's going on, help them organize their feelings, help them prioritize what needs to be done. They need to be seen, soothed, and safe. That's the way Dan Siegel, who is a neuropsychologist who works in the field of child psychology as well, he says they need to be seen, soothed, and safe. So to be seen is not just necessarily that I see you, but it's the child feels like they're understood. I'm seen, somebody understands me. I need to be soothed in some circumstances to help them get back to a state of calm. And they always need to feel safe. So if they are feeling threatened or pressured, even from us, like, oh, I was telling you how stressed I am, and now you're just piling it on, you're pressuring me as well, then we want to step back a little bit and say, how can I create an environment where my child feels like I'm here to help them? So what does my child need? All right, they need that balance of comfort and challenge. So I'll hear this from parents or professionals when I'm doing trainings, and they'll say, the idea of can they just get away with things, right? So if a child is doing a behavior, especially if it's a striking out or acting out kind of behavior, they're telling us they're stressed, and we're saying like, oh, well, they need, consequences or punishment. If there's comfort in challenge, we're actually saying to ourselves, oh, this behavior is telling me that my child is stressed. Let's deal with the stress, and then we can correct the behavior. So the comfort piece of it we'll talk about, and then the challenge piece. We want them to be in their best position to overcome the challenge, not feel like, oh, I got in trouble at school and now my parents going to be upset with me and they're going to be screaming at me and taking away my privileges. So I don't have anywhere to go to get that comfort and to try and figure out how to make the, make the transition into a more appropriate behavior.
So Michelle,
All right.
I have a question
Yes.
for you.
Yes.
Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
Regarding this balance of comfort and challenge, in regards to vaping, because this is a follow-up. What do you see or have experience with kids who use vaping? Is because I can relate to that, because I actually started smoking at a very young age, and it was almost like a form of coping for me.
Right.
So I don't know if you had any kind of feedback or experience from kids who do that.
Well, I would think if we just put vaping, I'm going to go back one more.
Okay.
So if we see the behavior would be the tip of the iceberg. And
Mhm.
so for some kids, it might be vaping. So we would have to say, if all behavior is communication, what is my child telling me when they're vaping?
Mhm.
So are they telling me that they're stressed and they're using it as a coping strategy? Or are they telling me that they want to fit in and they're using it a way to fit in? Or are they telling me that physically it just makes them feel calmer? So if we're going to change a behavior, we always have to think about what's driving the behavior, right? And remembering for kids that what drives a lot of their behavior is they want to belong and they want to be significant, right?
Yeah.
So if it is vaping because they're stressed, then we would have to think about challenging them, right? The comfort part would be, you caught your child vaping or whatever, or you're informed that they've been vaping. So the comfort part would be trying to get to the bottom of what is the vaping doing for them? What are they getting out of it? Like, help me understand. So they want to be seen. Help me understand what's in this for you. And then the challenge piece is talking about what could you do to meet that same need that's not going to harm your body. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Of course. No, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
So it's always thinking about, it's not just the behavior we're trying to change. We're trying to help the child meet the need that behavior is currently meeting.
Great.
So
Thank you.
And I think you had mentioned that with the vaping, that they said about changing bad habits into good habits. So how can you get whatever it is that behavior is giving you? How can you get that need met in a more positive way?
Yes. Perfect.
Great. Thank you for that question. That was great. So what can we do? Validate your child's fears and feelings. So to validate just means that we're seeing them. We're allowing them to have the feelings that they already have. It helps the child, just think for ourselves. If I'm angry at something that happened at work and I go home and I start telling my husband about it and he says, oh, you're just overreacting, then I have to prove to him that I have the right to be angry. Right? So if he validates it and he says, oh, I can see how that would be frustrating, then you feel like it actually lessens that sense of stress or anger or whatever the feeling is. So when we validate, it doesn't make it bigger, it makes it smaller. So sometimes if a child is anxious, we're worried that if I, say, oh, I can see how this would create anxiety, that we're actually reinforcing it. But we're not, because then we're going to go back and think about some ways that they can handle that anxiety or that stress. So when we validate it, say, yes, you are feeling, I see that you're feeling anxious. I see that you're feeling fearful. I see that you're feeling stressed by this. And then we help them organize, and I've said this a couple of times, help them organize their thinking. around whatever's happening. So we can get stuck in that stress loop. This is just too much. I can't handle it. And for kids, they do need help in prioritizing daily demands, especially preteens and teens. There's a part of the brain in the frontal cortex that goes offline for a little bit, and that's the organizational part of the brain. So everything for them seems like it's a priority. That fear of missing out. Well, if it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen. Or it seems like everything's due at once. So you can help them prioritize and organize their thinking around things. What can wait and what needs to be done immediately. Help them view life's challenges and mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow. So you made a mistake. What'd you learn from it? What can I do to be supportive? But we do want to listen without giving too much advice. So again, we want to be thinking about the age of your own child, whoever's listening to this. So you start out with really teaching your child, and eventually you become kind of your child's coach, if you want to use that idea, that they've already been taught what to do. So you're just coaching them to kind of come up with their own answers. So we want to try and listen without giving advice. Let them tell their whole story and be supportive while they figure it out. So we offer guidance, not answers. Well, what do you think would happen if you did this? Or how might you do that differently? And let them talk. So they should be talking more than we are as they age. For the younger ones, many times they really don't know what to do other than what they're currently doing. And it could be, they're acting silly or wired would be a sign of they may be feeling some stress, or maybe they're whining and clinging to you, or they don't want you to leave the room, or, so those would be some ideas that we know they're showing us with their behavior, or maybe they're shutting down. They're showing us with behavior, there's some stress. And so we would want to prompt a little bit more with a younger child. And what can you do? So this is really thinking about you as an adult person, as someone who cares for children or educates children, or someone who's the adult in the family. So we want to model saying no and setting boundaries that prevent unhealthy overload. So if someone from maybe church calls and says, hey, can you bring in some cookies for the bake sale? And you really can't, you just don't have another minute of time to give, but you say yes. And then you get off the phone and you say to your spouse, or you call your friend and say, I can't believe I said, that I'd bring in cookies. I really don't have time for this. And no one else does anything for that group, whatever it is, we start complaining. So we're not actually modeling saying no and setting boundaries. So if someone calls, we can say, I would really love to help out, but you'll have to get me next time. I don't have the ability to do that right now. That is modeling for our children. It's okay. You're not a bad person for setting boundaries, preventing unhealthy overload. And I think we all need to practice that. Well, I can speak for myself. I do need to practice that. Model eating right, exercising, and that balance of work and play. So it can't be all work or all play. We know that children learn through play. So play is the work of a child, but for ourselves, working and playing. Taking the time to actually play with our children, especially if you're working from home, just turning your computer off at the end of the day, rather than having it extend into the evening and you're still answering emails, while you're interacting with your family. Model a calm response to stressful situations by pausing and taking a few deep breaths before responding. So kids pick up on this. And I can remember my daughter doing this and my granddaughter mentioning it. So my daughter was feeling stressed by some behaviors that my granddaughter was doing. And she just stopped and she just took a deep breath and she went, and my granddaughter said, are you sighing about me? She said, yes, I am. However, I'm just trying to stay calm so we can figure this out. So we can model even more so than what we just say. And practice mindfulness or relaxation strategies and teach them to your child. So that's what we're going to go into next.
Michelle, can I just kind of I just want to say that I really appreciate these pretty practical methods you gave, because I think you read a lot about it now. And as an adult, I remember, a lot of things get passed down, right?
Mhm.
Like I remember my parents being stressed out about money, and now I have that anxiety. So now as an adult, first of all, practicing mindfulness and identifying that and trying to undo all of that, So I think these are very great and very, very just at your fingertips, practical ways to be able to not pass these things down, to your child, It's really great.
Thank you so much. And you are actually leading me right into the next slide. So let me see here. I can get this one to go. Whoop. Oh, I gotta go back one. Sorry. Um, so exactly what you said, Jen. So what is mindfulness? You mentioned that word. And how familiar are you with mindfulness? So everybody who's watching, I don't know your familiarity with mindfulness. It's a buzzword kind of nowadays. You hear it a lot, but what does it actually mean? So mindfulness means that we're paying attention in a particular way. So we're paying attention on purpose in the present moment and not judgmentally to what's going on with us, what's coming up from our unconscious. Exactly what you were saying, Jen. If you pick up on some stress from childhood, it becomes part of your belief system. Maybe there's a belief system that says money is scarce. You have to just save every piece of it, or really think carefully before you spend it. So that would be underneath. We have this circle here, and then we have the line. So there's awareness. We have our conscious awareness. We're aware of what we're thinking. Jen, when you said that you're aware that you picked up some of those beliefs, you have brought that to your conscious awareness, and you can question that, right? Because you brought it to your conscious awareness. It's above the line now. And that's the work that you're doing. You're saying, is this really true? Is there scarcity? Right? And begin to change things. So what we are aware of, we are in control of. What we are not aware of is in control of us. So if we have unconscious beliefs or habits that we haven't even thought about, there's this story that comes up usually around the holiday time, but it's a story of this family that's cooking together, and there's like a grandmother and a mother and a child, and the mother cuts off the ends of the roast and puts it into the pan before she cooks the roast in the oven. And the child says, why do you cut off the ends of the roast? And she said, oh, that's just how you cook a roast. And the mother says, I don't know. And then she asked her mother, why do we cut off the ends of the roast? And the mother says, oh, I don't know. That's just the way we do roast. So she calls great grandma and says, well, why do you cut off the ends of a roast? And great grandma says, oh, because when I only had very small roast pans, so I used to cut off the ends and tuck them on the side to cook it. So it was a habit that got passed down without even understanding why that habit started in the beginning. It's not necessary to cut the ends off a roast to cook it. It's just something that was passed down. But when we have these beliefs, they're oftentimes unconscious. That's just the way we do things, right? So when we begin to question them, that is being mindfully aware of what we do and why we do it, and then changing it if we don't want to do it. And I'll tell on myself. My mother was a yeller. I mean, she would yell to the point where she was kind of scary when I was a kid. And now I understand because there was four of us and we were very close in age. I have some empathy for her. But I found myself when I had children that I had picked up that habit, and I really had to work very diligently to break that habit because I became aware of it and because I remembered what it was like to be yelled at. All right. So we want to bring things to conscious awareness. I'm going to talk about just a couple of kind of mindfulness ideas when we are feeling overwhelmed in the moment. So think about if I'm about to yell at my child. I know that it's not really good to yell at children. I've been teaching parenting for 30 years. Are there times that I have ever yelled at my children? Of course, even after I had worked on it. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, like you're going to make a decision that you don't really want to make, one of the things you can do is ground, center, and breathe, and then repeat it if you need to repeat it. So grounding means I'm feeling stressed. There's a lot going on. There's chaos in the environment. I'm going to put my feet on the floor. I'm going to notice that or on the ground, the actual earth. Notice that I'm standing and that I'm solid and that I'm supported. Or I'm sitting in this chair right now. It is supporting me. So I'm grounding myself into being in this present moment. And then center. And center just means that I'm taking all that scatteredness that's going on and just trying to bring it into me, just trying to be more focused. One of the things that you can do, and I think you can see me doing this, is you cross your hands like this. You put your thumbs like this, and then you put them just like this on your chest. And you just kind of move them here. So you thump over here, and then you thump over here, and then you thump over here. And it takes a little bit of coordination to do that. What it's doing is bringing you into center. And then while you are doing that, just breathe. Just begin to notice. You don't even have to do anything special with your breath. Just notice that you're breathing in and that you're breathing out. And then repeat it as many times as you need to. I'm solid, I'm here, I'm supported, I'm in control, I'm centered, I'm focusing on my breath. That helps to calm the nervous system. So remember, stress is a physiological response. So we do need to calm our nervous system before we can have action in whatever challenge is happening. 3 keys to composure. Mindful awareness. So what am I feeling? That pausing and being conscious. So, the self-intervention, that I'm going to ground, I'm going to center, I'm going to breathe. And then once you are calm, then you can have deliberate action. Deliberate action means I am responding to what's happening in the moment. It's rational. It's a reaction that comes from the highest and best part of ourselves. So when I am taking good care of myself, I'm sleeping, I'm eating right, I'm practicing my mindfulness, I'm trying to keep myself centered, and my child does something that just seems like, what is going on here? That I respond to what the child is doing, rather than thinking about this always happens, or this is, I can't handle it, or one more thing, or you've done this 3 times before. I'm just being rational, thinking, what is this behavior telling me, and how can I help this child change the behavior if it needs to be changed? And we've all had these brilliant parenting moments. I mean, I've had some not so brilliant ones, but I've also had really brilliant ones. And something just goes right and it clicks, and you're like, oh, this parenting, I'm finally getting it. So that's when you're in the highest and best part of yourself. You're using the techniques that you read about, or listened to a webinar on, or read a book about. So mindfulness is an experience, and it takes practice. So you want to challenge your habits. One of the things you can do, and you can pause the video and do this, is handwriting. So if you write with your dominant hand, you just write your signature. I mean, 1,000 times I've written my signature. It's so automatic, I don't have to think about it. But if I try and do it with my non-dominant hand, I really have to pause and think and really concentrate on it. So it's just an idea of how automatic are we. We do want to pause and change things up a little bit. Fold your hands. Just take your hands right now and fold them in front of you like this. And then just notice, if you put your fingers up like this, which of your fingers is, wait a minute, let me think about this. It is your thumbs, I'm sorry. So notice, is your right thumb or your left thumb closer to you? So for me, my right thumb is. So this is when I fold my hands, I just do it without thinking. And now you want to unfold your hands and actually do it the opposite way. And it feels uncomfortable. It feels weird. Same thing with crossing your legs. If you always cross your right leg over your left leg, if you try crossing your left over your right, it just feels a little different. Or thinking about the idea, have you ever driven from one place to the other? Have you ever driven like from work to home, and you were thinking, oh, I got to stop and get milk, and then you're pulling into your driveway and you were so automatic, you don't know where your mind was. You're like, I am pulling into the driveway, I didn't get the milk, I don't even remember driving home. So we want to challenge our habits, pause every once in a while. And then there's this, and again, pause the video if you need any more time with any of this. I'm just going through it quickly. But take 5 is breath with finger tracing. So you just take your hand and put it up kind of in front of your face, I guess. And then you're going to start here at the bottom of your thumb. And when you go up, you're going to breathe in. And when you go down, you're going to breathe out. And you trace your hand. So you're in and out. And I'll show you the whole thing. So you're in and out, in and out. And slow it down, in and out, in and out, in and out. So you're breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. And you can teach that to your child. It's take 5. It literally takes a couple of seconds to do that. And then repeat it if you need to, or slow it down. See if you can, with your child, challenge them to go as slow as they can. And then, maybe go faster or slower. So you're just having them really focus in on, with intention, how they're breathing. And then the next bullet, awareness with the senses. So we carry our senses around with us. We see things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things, we feel things. And so when we are aware with our senses, it actually brings us back into our bodies, which sounds kind of funny. But if you are stressing, it's generally because you're thinking of something. And you're thinking of something that's not happening at this moment. You're thinking of, what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. So if we just think about, if I don't get this, accomplished, it's going to be horrible. So just for a moment, you want to get back in your body and stop that monkey mind, we call it. So awareness with the senses. What do I see? Just look around. So do this right now. Look around. What do you see in your environment? I see a picture. I see a card from a friend. I see a little plant. So when you do that, if you see 5 things, and then what do I hear? Just pause for a moment. You're hearing my voice right now. Maybe you're hearing a TV off in the distance, or you're hearing some children playing. Maybe you're hearing a dog barking. What are you hearing? And then smells. What are you smelling? I smell coffee brewing maybe, or a candle that I have in my room. It might be even a unpleasant smell. I smell a poopy diaper, who knows what it is. But you notice what smells are in your environment. And then taste. I'm still tasting some of the coffee that I drank a little earlier. And then feel. I feel a little bit of a breeze on my hands. I feel, if you're outside, maybe you're feeling sunshine. And then just notice the breathing. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. So you're going to come back to that breathing. So awareness with the senses, teach our children this as well. So even if you don't have time to go through all 5 senses, say you're riding in the car with your kids and they're starting to get, just kind of chaotic or crazy or talking over each other or whatever. Let's just pause for a moment, take a breath, and take turns saying something that you see. Take turns saying something that you hear, that kind of thing. So bringing them into their senses. And then 3 good things. So this, out of Duke University, they did something like a study. And it just makes sense. It's 3 good things. If every day you start by writing down 3 things that you're grateful for, over the course of time, it actually begins to change your outlook. It begins to create more neural pathways in your brain that are geared towards looking for goodness. And then I just love this statement here. When things are not good, believe in the goodness of things. And that's from Tara Brach, who was an American born mindfulness teacher. So when things are not good, believe in the goodness of things. In the end, it's all going to be okay, right? I think that's a John Lennon thing too. If it's not okay, it's not the end. So 3 good things, focusing on gratitude when you wake up. And it actually helps if you write them down, not type them on a computer or into your phone, but actually write them, longhand with a pen on a piece of paper. It gets into a different part of the brain and helps you to focus on positives. And we can teach our children to do that too. There's the brand, Life is Good. That actually is a multi-million-dollar company that was started by some brothers. And what had happened is their father passed away. And so it was a single mom raising 2 or 3 boys. I think there was 3 boys. And they would go around the table at night. They would have dinner together as often as possible. And when they did, they could talk about something challenging that would happen. But then they would say, well, but, or and sometimes you want to use and instead of but, because you don't want to dismiss your challenges, but you say, and life is good. And then you would have to say something that was good about life. And so then they grow up and they create this life is good company. I mean, I'm sure she's excited about that if she's still uh, with us in this world. So 3 good things. The other thing to be aware of, and this is, I think, almost my last slide, is sleep needs. So this comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It looks at how much sleep we actually need at different ages and stages. It is unique, so this is just a guideline. Some kids need less sleep than others, but thinking about that, sometimes we feel stressed or irritable. Our body, our nervous system is not as calm as we would like because we are sleep deprived. So infants and toddlers need a tremendous amount of sleep. So anywhere from 14 to 18 is an infant, and then 11 hours plus a 2-hour nap. Actually, with toddlers, some of them start to give up their naps, but that can really throw off their sleeping rhythms. So we do want to encourage them at least to have some downtime. And we need that as parents as well. Preschoolers, 11 to 12 hours. So average preschooler gets 8 to 7 at night and 9 to 5 with a nap. All right, so this is again an average. And then school age, 10 to 11 hours, which seems like a lot. So we're looking at school age, we're looking at any, those 5, 6-year-olds and up to early adolescence. If they have to get up at 7 to get the bus, and we want to count back 10 hours, what time do they need to be in bed is 9. So we really want to be thinking about that, how we can get them into the green zone prior to sleep. And of course, probably the biggest culprits are adolescents. They show that for optimal performance, most adolescents do well with 9.25 hours of sleep, and most adolescents get an average of 6 hours and 50 minutes. So again, that's an average. One of the things that can come up with adolescents is it's hard for them to get into that green zone and go to sleep. They have that fear of missing out. They need their phone with them. They're on their screens until they close their eyes, and that can really set them up for trouble sleeping. They also don't have as much melatonin at night as they do in the morning. So really getting those good sleep habits for them can be challenging, but if possible, to work towards that. And then adults, for ourselves, the average adult needs 8.25 hours of sleep. And the average adult gets 6 hours and 54 minutes. So that 54 minutes, again, is because they averaged it between several adults who probably reported it on a survey. So for us as well, we really want to be turning off those screens, lowering the lights in the house, maybe listening to some quiet music or a meditation before you go to sleep, rather than, Facebook, something political, or somebody put something up that you feel like you got to respond to, and you're all jacked up, and then you're trying to go to sleep.
Yeah, Michelle, I feel like today I only got about 6.5 hours, so I understand that. But yeah, I think it's important to really, I think with the phones now, they've shown that blue light getting on your phone can reduce melatonin and really affect your circadian rhythm.
Yeah,
So that's something I feel like we could also, maybe have a workshop session on that,
Yeah, you probably could. We actually, we can talk after about that, but we do have a sleep expert at CHKD who often does, trainings and talks.
Oh, that's great.
Could really get into this in great detail.
Yeah.
I just, know the figures here and a little bit about it, but certainly
Absolutely.
not to the length that he does. But that'd be a wonderful topic. All right, that was my last slide here. So I do want to thank you for allowing CHKD to be your partner in parenting, and to thank Jen and everybody at Virginia Beach Connections for inviting me. It's been really great to be here and share this information. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Tran. That was really, really amazing. I just love what you present. Being a yoga instructor and practicing for a long time, it just goes hand in hand. So thank you again. This is so insightful and super relatable. You don't need to go out and buy anything new, and you just need yourself and some grace and self-love, and just know that you can, and practice all of these practical techniques. So we hope all this information is helpful. And remember, just like Ms. Tron said, it is a practice. So see it, all of it as a learning experience, and give you and your child a lot of space and grace. And I would like to thank you, Ms. Tron, for your time, expertise, and thoughtful responses. And would also like to thank the Virginia Beach City Public Schools community for taking the time to be here with us virtually this evening. And as a reminder, these sessions are recorded and are available on bbschools.com. So thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.